Let's pull off a heist.
Let's. Sounds fun.
Okay. And welcome back to another episode of We Don't Know What to Watch, the podcast where two guys use the magic power of the internet to watch movies they've never heard of randomly. And maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. Hopefully they're good. And with me, as always, is the George Clooney to my Matt Damon, Kyle Mulford. And I'm Noah Saturn. I forgot your name for a second there, Kyle. I'm sorry. Too busy thinking about you and George Clooney roles. You and ER, you and...
Return of the Killer Tomatoes, and...
I was going to say, like...
Return to Horror High.
Dusk Till Dawn.
He was in all the Return movies.
Return of the Jedi.
I am pretty sexy like George Clooney.
Exactly.
I know.
Silver Fox.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing all right. Anyway, what did we watch this week?
Well, our main feature, we'll save that for later, but our first segment, What You Watching? I watched a movie. Normally I watch more than a movie in 2 weeks, but...
You've been a little busy?
I've been busy, or I've been lazy and playing video games or whatever.
Or you've been spending your time better ways than sitting and watching movies constantly like me, right?
Yeah, maybe. I watched The Handmaiden, directed by Park Chan-wook from 2016. It's a South Korean film. Trying to make a point to watch more South Korean films in general because, you know, they're pretty good. I've got a nice list I'm going off of, but I'm always kind of looking for more, particularly comedies. Because a lot of the movies that tend to get more, I guess, more traction here in the West, more buzz, or tends to be like the dramas or the thrillers,
or
like
the horrors.
Or like, because a scary thing can be scary across continents and languages and cultures, but something that's funny in the U.S. isn't necessarily funny in South Korea.
Well, and you're just not going to get cultural references with humor. Uses a lot of cultural reference, so
unless you're going for more like
broad slapstick,
or physical humor.
Yeah. So no, yeah, humor's really hard to cross boundaries with. So.
But yeah, The Handmaiden, it's good. It has about 5 more twists and a period piece. Takes place during when South Korea was still kind of being colonized by Japan, which is from like the 20s to about the 40s. 1920s, not the 2020s. But
not the roaring 2020s?
Yeah, which have been pretty terrible so far, if you ask me.
Man, we're only 2 months in.
I know, right?
This movie is on my to-watch list, so it's been on my to-watch list since it came out, because that one got a lot of buzz when it first came out, I remember.
It is currently, I watched it on Amazon Prime, and it was good. It was very good. Lots of great twists. You think it's one thing, then it's another thing, then it's another thing. There's a lot going on.
Cool. I will definitely have to check that out sooner rather than later. I, of course, as always, watched a whole bunch of shit. Some of it might have been shit.
Let's get into it.
I watched a movie called Wild Rose. I don't know if you heard of that one.
Well, there's a Wild Rose casino in small town Iowa, but that's...
No.
Okay.
It was not about the casino. No, this is about... I think she was Irish, or I think from Ireland, and...
She has to move to Brooklyn?
This girl who wanted... Yes. A girl who wanted to get into country music... And she wanted to get over to Nashville, and she just had gotten out of jail, and she has 2 kids, and she's trying to figure out her life. And
she's the daughter of a coal miner?
No, but might as well be. But the thing is I really wish I would have written down. Jessie Buckley is the girl who played her, and she was excellent in the film. And this was actually a really good movie, so I'd recommend this one. I know even if you're not a fan of country music, which I'm not a huge country music fan, this was just really well acted, even though it's a basic I want to be a music star movie, and there's a million of those, but just her performance was worth the watch. I watched Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Heard good things about that one.
I thought this would have been something I would have loved when I was like 14 or 15, because it wasn't like terrifying, like, there wasn't a lot of blood and guts, all this stuff, but the images were just creepy enough. This is a good introductory piece to horror for the younger crowd, I think.
You think you'd save it for use with like your kids? when they're a little older?
Possibly. I would say at least teenagers, especially with my kids. I mean, I'm sure younger than that could probably watch this. Some of the images kind of creeped me out, even, to be fair. But I like that it was that way because, honestly, the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books are something that I read in grade school.
Yeah, the best part is the illustrations.
Yeah, and so there are a lot of grade school kids who read these books, so to cater to more adults would have been a mistake, I think. So, because I think I read a few reviews that thought it should have been scarier, like more graphic and all this stuff, and I think they were a little disappointed, but I thought it was like a nice balance because the images were creepy enough to creep out an adult, but the movie was just tame enough that the young crowd who's going to read these books is going to enjoy it. So
cool.
Yeah, I dug it.
Did they talk about the big toe?
Yes, they did.
Good.
That was in there. Where is my toe? You have my toe. I watched a movie called Echo in the Canyon, and I had never even heard of this before, but then I was talking about it at work, and like a couple of people chimed in and said, "Oh, I watched that on Netflix." I had rented it on a DVD. I didn't even know it was on Netflix. It is about
a dog named Echo who goes into a canyon.
Yes.
And has an adventure with a raccoon.
Is that a thing?
I assume so. It should be if it's not.
Actually, it is about Laurel Canyon in L.A., from about the time period of like 65 to 67, and just kind of the musicians who lived there at the time and how they all were, the post-Beatles thing, where trying to emulate that sound, and you got bands like the Byrds and not emulate their sound, but like just kind of the post-Beatles thing that happened. And it was this weird sort of phenomenon where they all lived in Laurel Canyon. You had people from the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, and they would just go. It was interesting because they interviewed a lot of the singers from there. Like,
okay, so this was a documentary?
Yes, it was done by Jacob Dylan, and of course, like, he had his one hit, and now he's using this to... The documentary part was interesting, but then he gathered some people who were influenced by these bands, like Fiona Apple, Beck, and all of those, and they sang some of the songs interspersed throughout the documentary.
That's
so I was
cool.
like, which, I mean, they all sounded good, so that was interesting. But I was more interested in the interviews with the band members, like I think his name is Bob McGinnis from the Byrds. They interviewed David Crosby, who was also in the Byrds at the time, and Stephen Stills from Buffalo Springfield, and Crosby, Stills, Nash, and
what about Nash?
He was not in this. They
Dang
did
it,
interview
Nash.
Brian Wilson for like 5 minutes because I know he's isn't he like kind of a little out there?
I don't know what he is, but he makes good music.
Yes. It was interesting because, I said that they were also interviewing Phillips, I don't remember her first name, but from the Mamas and the Papas. And she was talking about how everybody would go to everybody's house and they wouldn't go to studios. They would just go, "Oh, I wrote this song. Can I play it for you?" And just walk into people's houses, have parties, all this stuff. She said, "I walked in one time to Brian Wilson's house and you can see this in movies and stuff." And she goes, "And I walk in the living room. There was nothing in it, just sand on the floor and a baby grand piano." And I guess Brian Wilson's wife just says to her, she goes, "What's going on here?" She goes, "I don't know, but he's writing the best music he's ever written." So,
Nice.
and that was when he was writing Pet Sounds.
Nice.
So they're just like, just let him be. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear some of the stories from the people who actually lived there at the time and were making music at that time. So and like I said, I think it's on Netflix, so it's out there to watch pretty readily. I watched the next movie in my Jack Nicholson filmography. It was another Western called Ride in the Whirlwind. And this one, it was actually, I think it was written by Jack Nicholson, either written or directed by Jack Nicholson. And this one was actually a lot better than the one that we watched last time, the shooting.
Yeah.
This was kind of it was still a really simple story. It was kind of a wrong place, wrong time, where Jack Nicholson and another guy are two cowhands going south, and they need a place to stay at night, so they stop at this cabin, this remote cabin or whatever, and it ends up being like a bunch of outlaws there. And then they get surrounded in the morning by vigilantes.
But did the hills have eyes?
Yes, because all of the vigilantes were up there.
Nice.
But they did not eat them or anything.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so then they got caught in the crossfires and they were chased down because they were thought to also be part of the gang. So it's like they had to get away. So it was kind of good.
I just like that the guy from The Hills Have Eyes had actually a pretty nice career as a character actor.
Nice.
And when I say the guy, you know
the
exactly
guy. Yes,
who I
the
mean.
guy. And then I discovered a movie that I did not know existed, and I don't know how I didn't know it existed. Directed by Richard Attenborough and written by William Goldman and starring Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret and Burgess Meredith. And it is a 1978 horror movie with Anthony Hopkins as a magician / ventriloquist who is kind of schizophrenic and...
Does he talk to his dummy?
And his dummy has its own personality. And so, and Anthony Hopkins is so creepy in this. It's like the creepy before Silence of the Lambs. So I really dug this. I have no idea how I never knew this existed with that cast. And the composer was someone of note too. And I've lost the name of who it was. But just the fact that it was written by William Goldman based on a novel of his, I was like, what is this? But I recommend seeking that one out.
Yeah, that is a solid lineup there. A lot of talent.
And speaking of a lot of talent, I also watched a 1986 movie called The Best of Times with Robin Williams and Kurt Russell.
Huh.
And it was about this small town where they lose football games constantly. Nothing good ever happens. And Robin Williams was the receiver during high school, and there was a big play where they were gonna win against the town over, and he dropped the ball. So like he had to live with that the whole time. So like now you cut to him in his like 30s or 40s, and he's like, I'm still living with this. I should have caught that ball. So he gets the old team together and they replay the game. And it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be with Robin Williams and Kurt Russell, but it was enjoyable, but it's something I'll probably forget. And I probably watched it in the 80s and completely forgot about it.
Yeah, was it a notable Robin Williams performance? Was he doing the...
No, he was very...
Played it straight for the most part?
It was played pretty straight, so...
Because he can't act. He has done some good... He did do some good dramatic stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean... Just Dead Poets Society is an example. And so, no, this one was just, he was a straight man, but it wasn't really a memorable performance by him or Kurt Russell, really. There are a few good moments, but overall...
Skip it.
Yeah. I watched Lethal Weapon 3, continuing on my Lethal Weapon franchise here. And this is the one of the four that I always forget what the storyline is. I think this is the most forgettable one, but then while I'm watching it, I really enjoy it still. So
that's good.
But yeah, there's no real notable scenes in this one.
So it's still good, but it doesn't suffer from like Avatar syndrome, where like you thought it was really good at the time, and now no one remembers what it's about.
See, I can't say that because I did not think Avatar was good at the time.
Okay.
But no, I get what you mean though. Yeah, this one does not suffer from that because I rewatch it going, what was the storyline in this? I go, oh yeah, and then I'm watching them going, I really dig it all the way through. It's great, just like all the rest of them.
It was a pretty amazing couple of days on Twitter when everyone first got like a Disney Plus and they watched Avatar for the first time in 10 years.
I bet that was disappointing. I'm a huge James Cameron fan, so
I like him too.
That's like probably one of my least favorite movies of his. I watched Police Academy 2 because they have all of them on Netflix. I watched the first one a couple of years ago, so I skipped over to Police Academy 2, and this is where we get introduced to Bobcat Goldthwait. And I can't remember if it was this movie or One Crazy Summer that I watched a million times as a kid that introduced me to Bobcat, but it was one of those two movies.
I thought it was going to be Shakes the Clown.
No, I still have never seen that. And I have not seen Hot to Trot either. But I did watch I watched all the Police Academies when I was younger, but One Crazy Summer I watched all the time. with are you familiar with that one?
I can say with a fair amount of confidence I have not seen any of the Police Academy movies or One Crazy Summer.
Oh, okay. One Crazy Summer is John Cusack, Demi Moore, Bobcat Goldthwait, and I can't think of who else is in it, but those are some of the bigger names. That it's a great, just fun movie. So it's one John Cusack movie that people don't talk about. They always bring up like The Better Off Dead or The Say Anything and all that, but you should definitely check out One Crazy Summer. Con Air. I love Con Air. Cyrus the Virus. I watched actually all of my family watched this one, The Biggest Little Farm. Have you heard of this one?
No. Is it about a farm that's big and also little?
Yes.
Is it next to the best little whorehouse in Texas?
No, it's in California. This was really interesting. It's a documentary about this couple that they were living in LA or something like that in a small apartment.
And then they bought a zoo.
Close.
With Matt Damon.
Close. They bought a farm that was run down. They rescued a dog, and then they couldn't keep it in their apartment anymore. So that prompted that she was into food vlogging, and he was like a photographer for like nature and all this stuff. So they decided to buy a farm, and they bought this huge farm. And what they wanted to do was do all natural farming, and they needed, so someone had to back them the money, because they bought this farm in California that was just, the dirt was just dried out, rock hard, and they took all of these acres and they put in like ground cover crops, and they put all of these different fruit trees and stuff in, and then they bought all these animals, and they wanted everything to be natural, so everything would cycle through. So everything, like the animals they would use for the manure, like they didn't use any chemicals, nothing like that. And the movie took a span of over like 7, 8, 9 years. And all of that time they ran into all these problems, because every time something else started, okay, the animals are crapping on the ground more often, which is really good for the soil, but now we've got a fly problem. So then we've got and they kept finding solutions to all this stuff by letting just nature in, because then they had wolves killing their some of their ducks and chickens and stuff. Well, they didn't want to kill the wolves because they want the natural cycle of things. So then they had the wolves killing the gophers that were chewing up their ground. So they found a natural solution to everything. And it was really interesting the way they did all this stuff. And I don't know how sustainable this was for the first several years, but the fact that they were able to use everything and finally get into this circle of harmony with nature between the farm and, just wild animals was really interesting. So I'd highly recommend that movie. And then the last thing that I watched was maybe end up on my, the top 10 of 2019 that we have not done yet. I watched Booksmart, and it was excellent. I thought that Beanie Feldstein and Caitlin Dever had excellent chemistry. You could have swore they really were best friends since childhood. I thought it was a really great kind of don't judge a book by its cover movie, kind of flipped on its head. And
so you are supposed to judge a book by its cover, and you were right the whole time?
No, more the fact that they weren't the ones being bullied, and they weren't necessarily bullying anyone else either, but it was kind of like they were the smart ones in the school. And I don't know how much you know the premise. They're the smart ones, but they worked really hard, and and they didn't party or anything so that they could get into the good schools. And everyone else, they thought they were better than everyone because they're like, I'm getting into this school and this school. And then they find out that all these other people who are living high school like you normally do with parties and all this, and they're like, well, I'm going to this great school too, and I'm going to this great school. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, I'm going to be an engineer, and I've got job offer. And they're like, well, what? We worked hard, and we're supposed to be better than you. And it was just kind of, it was a great movie about just kind of getting to know people before you judge them. Don't judge a book by its cover.
And they try to lose their virginity by prom night.
Yeah, there is
with Jason Biggs.
There is kind of the try and lose your virginity type storyline in there, but
It's
it
deeper
was done,
than that?
It was done well. And so I really enjoyed this movie. It really will probably end up on my top 10 2019. I still have several movies to watch. That's why I haven't made the list yet, but it's a high contender.
Okay. So. Shall we get into our feature for the evening?
Sure thing.
Okay. Well, what did we see, Kyle?
We saw Lupin the Third, Castle of Cagliostro. Cagliostro. This is a 1979 animated film by the master Hayao Miyazaki. And
yeah, that guy's not going anywhere within his career.
Yeah, and this is his animated feature-length debut. So,
as you said, he'd done some television before this?
Yes, and he had actually worked on the Lupin the Third, the first animated series of this in 71 and 72. I think he was brought on later, but so he had experience with the character. And this, let's get into a little history of the character, because there is a lot to this character. I think he was created in like 67 by, I don't remember the name, but he goes, his pen name is Monkey Punch.
Which is an amazing pen name.
You don't need your normal name anymore when you go by Monkey Punch. Love it. So I think the original manga ran from 67 to 69. And then they made a 12-minute pilot movie in like 70 or 71 or something like that, and then that turned into, they redubbed and redid the voices for it, and it turned into the pilot for the first animated series that ran from 71 to 72. And this has had, like, I don't know, as far as animated series go, they called them part 1, part 2, part 3. I think there was a Lupin the Third part 5 in like 2018 or 19, another series, like a 5th series. And they've had movies galore. This is the second feature-length animated film, because I think there was a live action film before this one too.
It'd be interesting to track it down.
Yeah, and there are so many films that come out, like even recently, I think in the last year or two, there's been more films. And one of the interesting things is, I think the guy who does the voice of Lupin, do you have the names written down? Did you write any?
I did not, because I am a bum.
Okay, and I did bad too, because I didn't write their names down. But the guy who played Lupin, I think he played Lupin in quite a lot of the movies and the shows, and he died in like 95. But the guy who plays his friend Jigen, is that how you pronounce it? Jigen? The main secondary character, he's still doing the voice to this day, and he was in the original 1971. He played that character in the original 71 series.
Cool. And
he's still playing the same character, so in all of these movies from all these different directors. So,
and is that the Japanese voice actor? Is that the
yes?
Okay.
So I did watch.
Assumed, but
I did on Netflix. I switched it over to the original Japanese with English subtitles. So. Interesting footnote on that is that I was reading that I think it was this movie. It was either this movie or Miyazaki's second movie, Nausicaa.
Yeah, Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind.
It was one of these two movies that, it might have been this one, that got butchered with the English translation when they dubbed it to English.
Mm-hmm.
And that made him not want to have any of his movies dubbed over anymore. And it was later acquired. And then he... him and another guy developed Ghibli Studios, which is one of the most famous animated studios out of Japan. And that was eventually bought by Disney, I think.
Not necessarily bought, but they've
distributed.
Because John Lasseter was a big fan. And
he became good friends with Miyazaki.
Yeah.
But yeah, they got the distribution rights or something.
Yeah, he
like
was,
that.
From what I understand, he was one of the people who was really pushing for it.
And once they did that, Miyazaki was really happy with their dubs and was okay then with them doing that. I think they even redubbed this movie in like 2012 or something like that. So this one even got a retreatment in the English dub.
Yeah, that's probably they take care of their dubs for these movies probably more than any other studio.
So if you're not a fan of reading movies, I think Studio Ghibli movies, Miyazaki stuff is probably okay to watch the English dubs.
Also, I'm just gonna say this now: dubs are fine, subs are fine.
Yeah,
And
just watch the movies.
Watch whichever version you prefer. I'm sure they're both good. End of conversation.
Yeah, I am the same way as long as you're watching them. Because you're getting the animation, you're getting the story, you're getting all the work that these people put into it, and you're watching something, something else, not just American blockbusters, whatever. There's a lot of good stuff out there. So watch dubs, watch subs, just watch the movies.
Yep.
But so anyway, Miyazaki, Lupin III is based off of this French author wrote some stories about a character named Arsène Lupin, who was a gentleman thief. And I don't remember when these were written, well earlier. And so Monkey Punch, he took this character and he created Lupin III, which is supposed to be the grandson of, of the original Lupin, because he'd be the third Lupin. But the thing is like he could do that because apparently like the copyright laws, they're not strict with copyright laws in Japan at the time.
Yeah, it's copyright law is a whole minefield.
Yeah, so he did this, and then when they did start dubbing over to English into America and other countries where copyright was more of a problem with the whole Lupin, the original Lupin series, then they had to rename it, and like a lot of things were dubbed him. They dubbed him either as Wolf because Lupine is basically wolf, or the other thing that they they would dub it in the Japanese pronunciation Rupan. But I think the copyright thing finally ended, and it's out there open domain or whatever.
Yeah,
now.
public
domain. So it's not a problem anymore, but so they had to just kind of dub a different name in there for some of the English and other foreign dubs.
And I ended up watching the dub version because that's the version that started playing first, and I couldn't be bothered to change it. They called him Wolf, which was confusing at first, but I figured Wolf equals Lupin. I'm sure it was.
And now you know the rest of the story.
Thanks, Paul Harvey.
So yeah, that's a little history on Lupin III, and I'm sure that there's a lot more to learn about this character. Other than one last thing, and this is important to this movie, is that the original character in the manga was apparently a womanizer and not a likable character, kind of an ass, and just basically not likable, I guess. And once Miyazaki came into that first series, he had changes he wanted to make to it, so he made him a little more lighthearted and fun. And I think like some of the hardcore manga fans weren't a real fan of the movies that progressively came out, because he's more it's almost a different, not a different character, but like he's more
different versions of the character.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, it's kind of like James Bond in the sense that the James Bond from the Ian Fleming books is kind of wildly different from like the James Bond of like the Roger Moore era, or
because it sounds like he was a lot more mature content, and I think Miyazaki wanted something that was going to be more fun for all ages.
Yeah, he's definitely more of like a dashing rogue, so almost like a Robin Hood, Errol Flynn type guy, and probably a little more like a Han Solo, where like he's mostly in it for the money, but he'll still be a good guy when he wants to be.
Yeah. And he even mentions in this movie, like there's a line of dialogue, there's lines of dialogue in there about, I was a womanizer and all this stuff. So like, it's almost like if you watch this movie in a context of he's grown up and matured a little, even though there are some immature moments. But I have to say, not having read any of the manga and not having anything to compare it to, I really like Miyazaki's version of this character.
Yeah, he's fun.
Yeah, it just makes for a fun show. And it's like, I don't want an unlikable protagonist.
Yeah, he's kind of fun. He's unflappable always, even when like he doesn't know what he's doing. He always looks like he knows what he's doing. So
yeah, so let's get into the movie a little.
Yep, and so like I keep going back to a James Bond sequel in my thought process about this, because you don't necessarily need a character introduction. All you need to know is gentleman thief, gadgets, and he's got some friends who help him out sometimes, and it just starts.
It does. We start with him and his friend Jigan. Jigan? I'm going to butcher these names, even though I just watched it again last night. And I love that his that side character, because he's always got the hat on. You can never see his eyes. He's just got like the full beard and the hat. And did you notice they always have almost worn down cigarettes in their mouth? They're all bent and their ashtray is full of just cigarette butts, but there's only one time in the movie that they're actually smoking.
Yeah, I don't know. That might have been something that was changed later. I don't know. I'm sure someone out there knows if they were smoking more in the original release or that was just how it was done.
Yeah, it seemed like they were always just putting a cigarette in their mouth but never lighting it.
Yeah.
But then there was one scene where they were lighting it, and I was watching the commentary on it, and he had a term for it because he had it on a little this little metal stick or whatever, so that like he could hold just the very end of the butt, so like they could smoke it all the way down to the butt of the cigarette. And there was a term for that kind of smoking, or whatever.
Cigarette holder or something.
Yeah, so that you could get it all the way down without your fingers getting in the way. So, but that was just something I noticed, was like cigarette butts everywhere, and they always had one hanging out of their mouth.
That reminds me of the John Constantine TV series that was only on like NBC for one season, and John Constantine is always smoked. Yeah, but because it was on network television, you couldn't show smoking. So like he was either about to get a light, or he was just like, or you see him like he just like puts out something, yeah, and then walks on.
And they carried his character over, and Matt Ryan is the best Constantine, and they carried his character over to the Arrowverse on CW, and it's the same thing. Like he always, and I love it because they get it. They know that he needs the cigarette, even though you can't have him smoking. And so, yeah, it's the same thing still, where it's just like constantly like grabbing a cigarette, but he's about to light, he wants to light, but then he like gets to talking and gets distracted. And so, but there's always a cigarette in his hand. So, but yeah, it's anyway, they just robbed a casino at the beginning, and they've got like a car just full of money, just buried in money in there.
And the cops are going to go after them, but then you realize that they did stuff to their cars ahead of time, so every time they try and drive off, their engine falls out, the wheels fall off.
And you know what I didn't realize, and even the second time I watched it with the commentary, and the commentary was done by a guy who runs a Lupin the Third fan site.
That's cool.
And so I was like, that's awesome. You're such a fan that you got to be on the actual Blu-ray commentary. That's cool. But he said, if you notice, you can actually see a character will be introduced to later, Gaiman. You can see his face somewhere in that sequence. So it's implied that he cut up all the cars with his sword.
Nice.
So, and that's why they're all falling apart.
Cool.
So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, the cops can't follow. And then while they're driving, Lupin discovers that, these are counterfeits, and they're called Gothic bills. And he knows about this stuff, but then you get into that later. But so they're like, these are all counterfeits, so we're just going to throw it all out the window. So they're driving down the freeway, just throwing bills out the window everywhere. And then we go to the opening credits. It's just kind of a montage of them driving,
doing cool stuff,
Yeah.
Driving, cartoony characters driving through beautiful scenery.
Yep. And I love it because I haven't watched as much Miyazaki as I should. And I've only watched a couple, and I can't really remember his animation style, but like in this, all of the backgrounds almost seem painted. Mm-hmm. And then anything with movement is very cartoony and just kind of fun and flexible and crazy.
Yeah, everything, it's all very smooth, even with this. So, no, a lot of his later films, I'm sure, are better animated, like Princess Mononoke, I'm sure, because that had a bigger budget. Yeah. But it's still, the animation is still good what it needs to be. In some scenes where like they're just characters talking or walking, they can do with a slower animation rate in like 12 frames or 6 frames probably. But then of course on the big scenes, the important scenes, the action set pieces, they want everything as smooth as possible, so that's when you go up to 24. Yeah, it's really nice animation. And
another thing I was reading about with Miyazaki is that I don't think he does any more than 10% CGI in any of his movies. Everything else is hand drawn. So, and I think I read a quote somewhere about him saying like, CGI can be good for movies. I'm just too old to learn it. So, so he doesn't do a lot of CGI in his movies. He does mostly 2D animate or like actual physical animation, and I actually like that because I wish there was more of that done still. Because I'm a fan of. I don't think that old school animation will ever go out of style.
Yeah.
You don't need to replace everything with CGI. There is a place for CGI cartoons. I think there are a lot of wonderful CGI cartoons, but we need to keep that the old school
it's
2D animation.
It's an art
going.
form, and we don't want it to become a lost art form.
Yeah, but he also bases a lot of stuff in realism and tries to get like a balance of fantastical but also realistic, so that it kind of doesn't get so far out there that the audience kind of gets, oh, this is too fantastical, So, in one moment that was mentioned by the commentator, which I also noticed the first time I watched, was there's a big car chase scene at the beginning, which is awesome, and there's even a part of the scene where Lupin drives on the side of a cliff. just on the side of a cliff, and then he goes up and through all these trees,
and he's driving like a little buggy.
Yeah, it's
like a VW Beetle
to get past all of the these guys that were chasing a woman that they saw, and it all ends in car crashes and all this stuff. And when he's falling off the cliff, he does his data grappling hook.
I was gonna say like the Batman grappling hook,
and
he saves a lady, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and when they're hanging there, and it's two of them on this tiny string coming off his wrist and up onto a tree trunk, instead of doing the thing you're most likely going to see in most movies and have him like rappel himself up and have it like draw back into whatever source it came from, he lowers instead.
Yeah, he's got like this little crank on his belt that he uses to lower himself down.
Yeah, so and that's the little things where it's like realistic, where they're going, okay, we've got this crazy stuff where he's driving on the side of a cliff, but then you get to this point where he's falling off this cliff and he grapples this thing, and there's no way that rope is going to pull them back up, so we'll have him lower down instead to the bottom. But so and I just found that kind of interesting, that those are the kind of choices you make in there to like have a fine balance.
Yep. So saves the lady. It's like, we'll meet again as lady gets taken away by spooky guys on a boat.
Yeah. And they were going to go to this place called Cagliostro because Lupin knows that that's where the counterfeit bills had come from, and he wants to get revenge for having stolen fake bills from... He's like, I'm mad that these were fake bills that I stole.
I went through all this trouble and they're fake?
So they're going to go there, and that's when they run into this girl who was being chased, and they saved her, and then she still got taken on a boat anyway, like you said, a creepy boat. And they go to this palace in Cagliostro, the Prince's Palace, and it's abandoned.
It's all like it's been burned down. It's just like ruins at this point.
And you find out that the Count had... everyone's dead. It's presumed.
Except the princess.
Yeah. And the Count had done this, and I think he had set the fire so that like now he's in charge of Cagliostro. And he's got his own castle, hence the Castle of Cagliostro title. Oh. What? So they go to the castle, and then it turns into there's the money and secrets in there, but then also the girl.
Also the girl's like, oh, well, it's time to be a hero, I guess. We're going to be good guys, him and his buddy Jagan.
And so...
That's kind of our basic setup. We're going to get into this castle, be the hero, save the girl, and find the secrets of the castle.
And that's basically it. Like we said, there's no real character setup. You just right away the setup is him robbing a casino, so he's a thief, but he's also charming.
Yeah, he's a dashing rogue.
Yeah, and so it turns into this. I'm gonna go save the girl, and him and Jagan go swim into the castle because he says he's been in this castle before because he tried to get the counterfeit money before. And Jagan's like, well, how did that go? He goes, oh, I got my ass kicked. it was great. The just the expression that they draw on his face and everything when he's like telling the story. He's like, oh man, it went horrible. He says with a smile on his face.
Yeah.
He's like, let's do this again. And telling the story about how like anybody who's ever gone in there has never come out again, which leads you to the whole, he must be the best thief ever because he's the only one who got out of there.
Exactly.
And, he just barely got out with his life, but he got out.
Go in, find the evil count, who is like one step away from stroking a cat in that sort of film. So this is a very simple film in a nice way, because this is very straightforward. Do this, do this, do this.
And there's an inspector that is always after him, and I think that carries over from the show also. And he calls him in to the castle, and then he also sends a note to this was after he already got into the castle. At one point he called the inspector in so that he could trick them into thinking he was inspector, and he had like this whole get up and tricked everybody.
And kind of his and one of his signatures is that before he robs a place, he leaves his calling card saying, hey,
I'm gonna rob you.
I'm gonna rob you.
The best calling card ever. I'm just going to tell you I'm going to come rob you.
And I'm going to do it anyway.
And you're going to like it. So he gets in, meets the princess, because he had gotten the ring from her when he saved her. She had accidentally left her ring with him. And he recognized the symbol. And then he gets it. And it's funny because him and Jagan both swim into the castle, but Jagan ends up back out.
Yeah.
And he kind of is pushed off to the side in this movie a little bit.
It's Lupin's movie. He's just a buddy to help out when needed.
Yeah. You get the idea that if you read the manga and watch the shows, that he's probably equal partners. Mm-hmm. But in this, he's kind of sideshowed in this movie. And so he's on the outside, and then Lupin gets to the princess, and he leaves a ring. He leaves the ring with her, and then he ends up out of the castle. Or no, he gets dumped down a trap door, because there's trap doors everywhere in this castle.
Yeah,
it's so cool.
And then like also, so now in addition to the cops, the count's off after him too, and his count has like these weird ninja robot things,
like metal on their arms and like these really sharp claws.
They can shoot like stab fingers and shoot rocket fingers or whatever.
They're like hunched over ninjas, just like an army of them. It's like,
yeah, they remind me of the ninjas, like the Foot Clan in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game.
Yeah, because they were always kind of hunched over too, weren't they?
And then like they're robots because it was against rules to hurt actual people. So that's why it was robots.
Yeah,
kind of like how in the X-Men cartoon, like Wolverine would only ever cut up robots.
Nice. But yeah, so there's all these ninjas, and he gets dumped down a trap, but the ring that he left, the Count finds out it's fake because Lupin's talking to him through it, and then he explodes the ring remotely.
Yep.
And this is kind of cool because there's a scene where him and Jagan are in this hotel type room or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's doing something there. What he's doing is actually making this fake ring.
Yeah.
He's making a mold for the fake ring. So they even have the detail of him while he's talking to Jagan making the ring.
Everything is very clear.
Yeah. So then he gets out of the castle, and then he calls in another friend, Gaiman, who's this great swords master.
Yeah, so we've got like a samurai, and a marksman, and a thief.
So, and then we forgot about, there's also a character inside the castle already on her own little mission.
Yeah.
Fujiko, and who he calls Fuji Cakes.
Nice.
And I don't know what she's doing in the... She
said she was like a rival thief who had been there casing the place for a while, making herself a member of the staff.
Yeah, so she's in there doing her own thing, and she's like, just don't get in my way while you're saving this girl, and,
Well, he gets in the way.
And, well, before he gets out of the castle, though, he runs into the inspector because he also got dumped down the trap.
So then they have to, like, work together.
They have to work together to get out, and while they're trying to get out, they find the room that has all of the fake bills and the money presses and all that. They light it all on fire.
Yeah, because they need a distraction.
And then they run up to the top of the castle and get in a gyrocopter. And they escape that way. And Lupin and... Well, actually, Lupin and the inspector and Fujiko get out that way.
Yeah, they all try to escape, but oh no, they're running up here because the princess is locked in a tower that's not connected to anything except like this sort of extending walkway between the main castle and her tower. They all get stuck on the roof. They try and work together. Lupin gets shot in a very dramatic way, so the princess is like, I'll marry you and be okay with you. As long as you make sure that these three are okay. It's like, fine, whatever. So they barely make it out. And then they realize, Lupin's in a coma. Wakes up 3 days later. It's the day of the wedding. We still got to save her. She did this for us. We still got to save her. So then for our third act, we go back to the castle where they're all working together trying to save the girl, solve the mystery of whatever the treasure is supposed to be.
While he's recovering, though, that's when he decides to give the backstory of, I met this girl 10 years ago when she was real young and she saved my life or whatever. Because it was when he first tried to break into the castle and he got like shot in the back with some, I don't know, spears or something and fell into the water and she saved him. And so he did know who this girl was the whole time. And then the other thing that was happening before they go back to the castle was the inspector goes to the UN and says, hey, this count has these counterfeit bills and they're these Gothic bills and they're used throughout history to fund different armies for uprisings and all this stuff. And to like,
because he has like counterfeit bills of every kind of currency around the world.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's used to upset the balance throughout history, which I found was kind of interesting, like just putting it into history perspective and going, this is why this happened. Because
once again, Bond's supervillain.
Yeah, because they had extra money from these Gothic bills, and so but the UN is like, well, they're like a sovereign nation or whatever. Like we can't just go in there and say, who's going to believe us?
Yeah,
and
what kind of evidence do you have?
Yeah, and they're like, we can't do this because this is just going to look bad. And and if you say that you were in there and you found this, well, why were you in there? And so they can't do anything about it. But then the inspector finds out that Lupin is going back into the castle, so he's like, I'm going after Lupin again.
It's like, fine, I'll have to work together. So then they have to work together, form an uneasy alliance.
And you get Lupin doing a disguise. Everybody's doing a disguise.
Everyone's in disguise because you're a master thief and you're in disguise with all your buddies, so you can sneak back in over the border because the place is crawling with cops. Everyone wants to get him. Sneak in, make it to the wedding.
Fujiko is a news lady.
Is a reporter and a camera person. The inspector can get in because he's an inspector, but then
Lupin
and the
becomes
bros.
a bishop.
Yeah,
who's doing the ceremony. And we don't know what he did with the actual bishop, but and then
there's this big scene where like you see someone like, I object to this wedding, and see someone who's wearing Lupin's clothes. He's wearing like a mask over his face. I'll do this, and he's talking. He gets stabbed, keeps talking. This isn't even my final trick. Then, of course, turn around, pulls off the beard and the outfit, and of course it's him, runs away with the princess. And then, of course, they make a chance to run down the stairs. So then, of course, the inspector can run down after him, followed by a live camera person.
That's what I actually liked about that was that scene was because Lupin did not go downstairs, but the inspector is like, hey, camera person, I think he went down here. He's like, follow me down here. I'm going to chase Lupin. And it's like this real big act. Like he's just like so over the top with it. And he gets down there. He's like, what is this? It's fake bills. What's all this counterfeit money? Oh my gosh.
I was only here chasing Lupin.
I just happened to run across this. On
live television.
The UN is like in the background. We can't stop him. He's on live television. So, But I thought that was kind of fun just because like the voice actor, and I'm sure they did it with the dub and the sub, but like just over the top performance with the voice actor. Mm-hmm. Lupin's down here, I bet. So then, yeah, we get this big fight and more of the crouchy ninjas. And
then they try and make it out on the boat to the other side of the lake where kind of like there's this big clock tower.
And that's
because when they put the two rings, there's like a good ring and a night ring and a day ring. Put them together, they realize, it has to do with the clock tower. When such and such sees like, well, there's like a bust on the east side of the clock tower. That has to be where we go. They get chased by the Count.
And I think this was supposed to reveal... I think Lupin thought this is what was going to reveal the treasure. So he was trying to get to these rings the whole time.
Yeah, because he still wants the treasure.
Yeah. So they get this and they get up on the clock tower. They're fighting on the clock tower.
I got some heavy... First of all, I like it whenever someone fights inside a clock tower or when all these giant gears
Great Mouse
everywhere.
Detective?
I did get Great Mouse Detective. This predates it, so...
Yes.
Maybe someone saw it. Maybe was inspired. I don't know.
I that is Disney. Was Lasseter working at Disney at the time, or is that before his time?
I don't know exactly
because Great Mouse Detective was like mid '80s. So.
Yeah, I don't know the exact timeline of it, and then it just could turn into another Kimba the White Lion situation. But then it's like it's a whole weird thing because like Disney influenced Tezuka, then Tezuka influenced Disney. They almost like played off each other in a feedback loop because Tezuka, the guy who made Kim of the White Lion and Astro Boy, and pretty much the Walt Disney of Japan, was a really big fan of Bambi.
So yeah.
That's a whole... Anyway, point is, I liked it. It was cool. Also reminded me of that one scene in Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times.
Yes, yeah. Eventually, somehow, they ended up giving up the rings.
You fight your way up the clock tower, so of course then it's a broken clock tower.
Yeah.
And then of course then you fight and you're on your way of like the hands of the clock on the outside. It looks really cool. Blah blah blah.
Lupin and Clarice, or is it Clarice?
Mm-hmm.
Lupin and Clarice eventually fall off. The Count gets the rings and puts it into the clock tower, and what does this do? It like puts both hands up to midnight, so it actually crushes the Count.
Yeah, that was kind of dark.
Because
it gets to the point where, like, so he's sort of the hands are moving up. He can't move out of the way. He gets on one hand, he gets on the other, and he's trying to push them apart. And then you just hear like it zooms out, and you hear like a crunch.
And that's the second crunch in the clock tower because there was a ninja that got like crunched in the gears when they're climbing up all the gears, and then they cut away, and you hear.
Yeah, so I don't know. Did he just get decapitated?
Yeah, so the Count gets like crushed by the clock hands, and then the whole tower just falls down.
And these floodgates open and tons of water going everywhere.
You find out that it was built like a dam, and all the water comes out of the dam, and what's revealed is an ancient Roman city. And that's the treasure. And Lupin was even like, well, this is a treasure for the whole world. I can't fit it in my pocket.
Yeah, it's like I can't carry this. So.
But then you also had the cheesy line towards the end where Lupin drives off and Clarice stays there because Clarice is like, well, I'll go with you and I'll learn to be a thief and all this stuff. And he's like, well, you don't want this lifestyle and all this stuff. He go and whatever, and he leaves, and then the inspector gets there. He goes, oh, just too late again. He just misses Lupin. He's like, I gotta run after him. And he's like, he did get the treasure. And she's like, what? He goes,
he may not have stolen any physical treasure, but he stole an important treasure all alone. Your heart. And it's cheesy, but it's fun.
Yeah. And so then the inspector goes back to chasing Lupin and drive off into town.
I'll get you next time.
Gadget. And so just a fun movie.
I agree.
That's my
extremely
analysis.
well animated, very good to look at, very pretty. I enjoyed its use of colors and how it's shift different colors on clothing depending on, of course, nighttime. That's always a nice touch versus daytime, even though they're wearing the same outfit.
The pacing was really good.
Very well paced. Didn't overstay its welcome.
It moved.
Moved
about
clip.
an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And like I said, I haven't read any of the original manga or anything, but whatever changes he made, I liked because you got a more, like you said, charming, roguish, whatever, dashing rogue or
straight-laced adventure hero sort of thing.
Yeah. So he's still a bad guy because he's a thief, but he's much more. He's very likable and charming and fun, and like you said, no matter what situation he gets in, he's just like, I'll get out of this. It's cool. He just adapts to whatever is around him. And I liked his side characters because there was the different, just kind of like in any good adventure, you've got like the main leader who's the brains and the main action, and you've got the marksman, you've got the swords person, you've got like even Fujiko kind of helped out too, so she was the other kind of spy character and good fighter in her own right.
Yep, just like a good heist movie.
Yeah, so it's just a fun time, and I think that does it get a little dark with crunching the guy in the clock tower? Yes, but it's also, I think it'd be very family friendly.
Definitely very family friendly. And would you watch this with your children?
I would definitely watch this with my children. So I might have to introduce it to it. And they might have to watch the subs, because one thing I noticed was this was one movie where I don't know if they just talked fast or what, but I was having trouble keeping up with the dubs. Or I mean the subtitles. I was like, what did that say? That was too quick.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's, like I said, the dub was fine.
But yeah,
understand everything. Subtitles are great too, because it can trick your kids into reading.
Yeah, and I don't have to worry about that. My kids are readers, so
yeah.
But no, I would definitely watch this. I would watch this with my children, and I would recommend this to anybody, especially a fan of good animation. And if you want to see kind of the roots of Miyazaki, if you're a fan of his, he started out great from the get-go. And I don't know how many directorial debuts have we done on this podcast now?
I don't know.
But it's been a couple, because we did this one, and then we did Baji on the Beach. And then I swear there was at least one or two others, but I could be mistaken.
Who knows?
Oh, that Starfish movie.
Oh, yeah.
I that might be that person's only movie.
So far.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. We're getting a lot of first times from people we don't know, and from people like Miyazaki, who I didn't know he did a Lupin the Third movie. I didn't even know Lupin the Third existed before this.
Yeah, it definitely might be something looking into. I know that the manga was translated and brought over to the U.S. in like the early 2000s, so I'm sure there's plenty of stuff. And of course, I saw a new CG animated film was supposed to come out either last year, this year in Japan, and it looks awesome. It just looks like 3D versions of the same style of characters, and it's got the same basic vibe, ton of fun. Also, we forgot to mention, I like the soundtrack to this movie.
Yes.
Very jazz inspired.
Yeah. It was very good music. So,
and it kind of fits the character because, it's jazz, this can be very improvisational. It seems like Lupin's plans often were pretty improvisational. It's like, oh, go this way, oh, go that way. It's sort of
kind of like one of my favorite scenes is when he's trying to get to the castle tower at one point, and he goes up to the roof of the other part of the castle, and he's going to shoot a rocket across. Well, the thing falls down the roof, and he tumbles after it, and then he starts running down the roof. He's like, well, crap. And he just jumps and then leaps off of like rooftop, and is like, and then runs into the tower and climbs up it. It's just like, oh, well, I got across. So yeah, it just very fun, and I like his just improvisation in this, and
I like kind of his basic character design, because he's got a distinct enough silhouette and a face where you recognize him, because he's got kind of his dark hair, his sideburns, and kind of his suit that he always wears. So he's skinny, but he's still strong. He reminds me more of like he's built like a gymnast.
Yeah.
As opposed to like a big muscly guy.
And I like Jagan too, because he's just kind of laid back and just kind of goes with it. He's like, okay.
Yeah, whatever you say, boss.
Yeah, whatever. And I think, did they use the term boss in the dub?
They might have a couple times.
Okay, because that was one thing that they had also said. Something that was like, in all of the different iterations, that's not meant as, oh, Lupin is above him or anything, because they're just supposed to be like just two friends who are like equal in all of the heists.
So he calls him boss as more of a term of endearment.
Yeah, I think so. So, but I just like that. Even though he's just like, just whatever you want to do, dude.
All right, so
okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. So let's move on to our next segment, which is, of course, double features. So what do you think would make a good double feature with this film?
You kind of spoiled it earlier in the podcast, and I actually was going to go with Ocean's 11.
Nice.
Because you've got just the suave thief, charming suave thief in George Clooney, and he's gathers up all of this. Brad Pitt is his right-hand man. He's like the Jagan of Ocean's 11. And then you have all these other people that he's worked with before that he brings in, and it's kind of like Gaiman and Fujiko, and you have all these, with all of their different specialties. You've got like the acrobat who can get into tight spaces. You've got like the computer actor. You've got the bomb expert. You've got all of this stuff. So everyone has a role in it, and this movie just opens up with a casino, and so Ocean's 11 is obviously robbing a casino. But then once they get into the casino, you find out that his ex-wife is there. So there's also a thing with the girl. And so I just a little parallels, but like mostly just I would like it as a double feature because it's both these just charming thieves
that are just fun to watch.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is Ocean's 11 is just so much fun to see the camaraderie between them, especially between George Clooney and Brad Pitt. I love them.
Yeah, they work well together.
That scene where he's in the hotel room and the other one comes in and is like, "Are you crying?" He's watching Oprah. So no, I think it would be a great double feature. So that's Ocean's 11, and I'm sure most people who will listen to this have probably seen Ocean's 11, but go watch it again. It's great.
I think I would recommend for a different flavor of a heist movie, but still work, would be Rafifi, which is a French heist film from the 60s, if I remember correctly. And what's cool about that one is that during the actual heist sequence, and it's kind of follows, it's definitely more of a crime noir film of like, they get together, they do the heist, and then things go terribly wrong afterwards, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
But what's fun is like the actual heist sequence is kind of slow, detailed, but there's no music during that sequence. It's almost like in almost complete silence what they're doing, except when one of them accidentally like makes a noise or something during the actual heist. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
It's a great sequence and good movie overall. A lot of fun.
Cool. Let's check that out. And you all should too. Check it out.
Where do you think we'll end up next? We kind of hit the jackpot with the Miyazaki film.
We'll see where we can go from there.
Yeah, who knows?
Let's get on our movie roulette here. 70% or better. And do we want any particular genre? Should we do a cult movie?
Oh, sure.
And spin it.
Spin, 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 spin.
All right. Let's see if you can guess this one. An ancient intergalactic warrior arrives on Earth to put a stop to a demonic child's plot to reproduce Satan's next generation of evil.
Sound of Music.
Yes, you are correct. No, this is where is the year on it? 1979 horror cult movie called The Visitor with Glenn Ford and Lance Henriksen.
Ha!
Interesting. And I look at the cover of that one.
That is definitely from the 70s.
Yes. We got like this weird bird head with no eyes in the sockets, but its beak open and an eyeball looking out of it.
In pink clouds.
And he's in pink clouds with lightning.
I think I may have seen this as an album cover somewhere.
It very much looks like an album cover.
Yeah.
This is on Popcorn Flicks, Tubi, and Vudu for free.
Oh boy.
So you can find it lots of places for free. It's got Glenn Ford, Lance Henriksen, John Huston, Sam Peckinpah, Shelley Winters.
That's a weird cast.
Yes. Franco Nero is uncredited as Jesus Christ.
Oh, Jesus is in this film.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is uncredited as himself.
Oh, that's cool.
I
hope he flies an airplane.
This is This is interesting.
What have we come across?
I don't know. But, we've had a couple of good ones with this one and Nicholas Nickleby. So, I mean, hopefully this one.
Who knows? Hopefully it's a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. You never know what you're going to get with cults. Sometimes they're great, like
sometimes
weird, bizarre.
Sometimes it's The Room. Sometimes it's just bad.
So, so we never put this part in anymore, but follow us on Twitter. I'm at AwesomeKM.
I'm at Noah_Saturn.
And we're on Instagram at We Don't Know What to Watch. You can email us at WeDon'tKnowWhatToWatch@gmail.com. And hit like, subscribe, do all those crazy things you do.
Smash that like button.
And until next time.
I'm a master thief.
And I always get caught. Damn it.
And I'll get the Pink Panther next time.